Today, the Prime Minister declares jihad on the ABC.
Heads should roll over this.
Bill Shorten caught lying at the worst possible time.
I'm kicking myself in hindsight.
Why Tony Abbott should thank Malcolm Turnbull for saving him. And one of the craziest global warming scares yet.
I'm Andrew Bolt, and this is the Bolt Report. The ABC this week gave the Abbott government a big excuse to fix what's badly broken. Its Q&A program put on an Islamist, someone jailed for threatening to kill ASIO officials after he bought a gun. And it did that to embarrass a minister, Stephen Chiobo, about the Abbott government's legislation to strip terrorists with dual nationality of their Australian citizenship.
I'm happy to look you straight in the eye and say that I'd be pleased to be part of a government that would say that you are out of the country as far as I'm concerned.
As an Australian, I would be happy to see you out of this country.
OK.
That applause for an extremist shows the kind of audience the left-leaning ABC has now cultivated. And then Mullah said this.
The Liberals now have just justified to many Australian Muslims in the community tonight to leave and go to Syria and join ISIS because of ministers like him.
Now, that's the comment that has had the ABC apologising, which misses the main point. Why did the ABC give this guy a platform in the first place? Why did it reward his crime? Why did it show other hotheads that extremism can make you a star too? And another thing. Why did it then publish tweets like this during Mullah's appearance, warning viewers the government is a menace and they should get a gun? That tweet, get a gun, was actually from a Griffith University lecturer. Amazing. In fact, it's also lethally reckless, as the past 48 hours again prove, with Islamists shooting dead dozens of tourists in Tunisia, murdering dozens of Shia worshippers in Kuwait, and decapitating a man in France. Now, the judge who jailed Zaki Mullah, Q&A star, warned that giving him this attention was likely to encourage even more outrageous and extravagant behaviour. And that makes Q&A stunt so stupid.
I think that the ABC does have to have a long, hard look at itself. Whose side are you on? Whose side are you on here?
But I asked the Prime Minister, so what are you going to do about it? See, this isn't an isolated mistake. It's produced by an ABC culture so left-wing that every main current affairs show is headed by someone of the left, like Tony Jones, Barry Cassidy, Emma Alberici, Mark Colvin, Lee Sales, Paul Barry, Fran Kelly, Jonathan Green, and so on. And it's a culture that tends to excuse Islam and blame the West. So, statements like Mullah's aren't new on the ABC. Q&A gets people to make them again and again. The government's just picking on Muslims. The government's to blame for turning Muslims into terrorists.
And I'm very cynical about the government's use of these raids to politicise the Muslim problem of terrorism.
The fact is that ISIS is barbaric, and I think that a large part of it is the Western intervention and what's happened.
None of you do absolutely anything to help us. You've always sold us out.
So please don't use the Muslim people, don't use the issue of radicalisation to really sell these laws, which is really about a sustained attack on civil liberties in this country.
And always with Q&A, it is an audience mainly from the left, clapping panellists mainly from the left, to give the impression Conservatives are few and the public hates them. Remember the Q&A protester who threw his shoes at former Prime Minister John Howard? Or the socialist who shouted down a debate on the government's education reforms?
Okay.
So, what will the government do about this? Sure, it's now called an inquiry. But will it demand the ABC board make the ABC abide by what it admits is the law, its statutory duty to present news and information impartially? Or will it cut the ABC's unhealthy size? We pay $1 billion a year for an ABC bigger than any other media organisation, with 4 television stations in every city, 5 radio stations, not including its digital ones, an online newspaper and opinion site, a publishing house, and even its own bookshops. The government is right to be angry with the ABC, but what will it do to fix it? Coming up, the man the ABC tried to ambush. The Prime Minister was angry enough when the ABC's Q&A gave a platform to Zaki Mallah. He was furious when the ABC then repeated the screening.
Utterly incomprehensible. Here we had the ABC admitting a gross error of judgment. They compounded the mistake by rebroadcasting the program. Now, frankly, heads should roll over this.
Now, one government frontbencher knows better than almost anyone what happened on Q&A. It is the Liberal who was on that panel, Stephen Chobo, Parliamentary Secretary of Foreign Affairs and Trade. And he joins me now. First, congratulations on how you handled yourself.
Thanks, Andrew.
Did Q&A warn you that in the audience was a man jailed for threatening to kill security officials, and he'd be asking you a question?
No, I mean, I didn't get any warning about that. And it was fortunate because I happened to recall from my time on the Parliamentary Intelligence Committee a bit of background about Zaki Mallah and things that he'd said and what had happened. I wasn't across all the detail. I can, admitted that on the night. But
so basically, it was clearly going to be an ambush, and it would have worked had you not happened to know some of the details.
Well, look, I mean, there's no doubt that the producers knew Zaki Mallah's background. I mean, that was self-evident in the sense that when Tony Jones spoke about Zaki, he had all his case background, which you referred to, of course. The thing about politics, Andrew, you get used to things flying at you from left, from right, from all different directions. So that's why I just think it's so fundamentally important. And what I was able to, I think, achieve on the night was to just state my belief, stick to my conviction, because ultimately that's what gets you through.
Yeah, absolutely. But I'm going to the ABC. Their ambush would have worked better had it not been for almost like happenstance that you happen to know some of the background. That, I think, is really unprincipled. Now, were you also aware that during the discussion, with you on the screen at times, the ABC screened a tweet urging viewers to get a gun because the government was out of control?
No, so I mean you don't see that, and I mean it's concerning to me that you'd actually have not only someone on the screen preaching, frankly, views that are aligned with being a terrorist sympathiser, but you've also got something down the bottom saying, go get a gun. It's pretty extreme.
Now, ABC boss Mark Scott on Thursday gave a long speech defending the ABC, but in a way I think was either deceitful or ignorant of the real issues, but I'd like your opinion.
Sure.
First, he asked the Prime Minister. He answered the Prime Minister's challenge. Whose side is the ABC on? Have a look.
The ABC is clearly Australian. It's on the side of Australia. The A in ABC is for Australian. Surely, no one seriously wants the ABC to be a state broadcaster.
Now, I say it's deceitful because there's a straw man argument, because as far as I can tell, no one in the government has suggested the ABC be a state broadcaster or even a pro-Liberal one. True or not?
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, the fact is that as a member of the coalition and for those of us on the centre-right, the view is, well, what we expect of the ABC is more balance. What seems to be missing is a sense of balance. Even if you take my experience on the panel, and it's a fairly consistent experience week in, week out, there were 2 of us that you would say were centre-right, and then there were 4 that were either sort of centre-left or lunar left, frankly. And in that situation...
And the host.
Well...
the host is of the left.
Well, sure. I mean, Tony's put forward his point of view in a range of areas. I think people know where he's coming from. But, what coalition members are looking for, and I know what supporters that have reached out to me have said, is that they want much more balance from the ABC than what they're getting.
Yeah, so I think Mark Scott was completely out of order to suggest you wanted to make it a state broadcaster. Here's the second claim he made that I think was very deceptive, a sort of bastardised free speech argument. Have a look.
At times, free speech principles means giving platforms to those with whom we fundamentally disagree. It was the crux of the Charlie Hebdo argument last year.
The Charlie Hebdo argument. So Scott is saying the right of the ABC to put an Islamist on primetime TV in a favourable light is the same as the right of Charlie Hebdo cartoonists to mock Islam without being shot dead. Fair point?
No, I mean, look, frankly, I find it a preposterous argument. Can you imagine? This is Zaki Mallah, who's made comments in the past about wanting to see 2 female journalists gang raped. I mean, it's distasteful stuff. But could you imagine if Zaki Mallah had used that national platform to stand up and say that he wanted to see 2 women gang raped? Could you imagine the uproar from the people? And there wouldn't be any of these spurious arguments about the right to freedom of speech or anything like that. This is a decision about a professional judgment about whether or not you provide a taxpayer-funded broadcast, a national platform, for someone who is a terrorist sympathiser and someone who has openly called for the gang rape of women.
Scott, in his big speech defending the ABC, mentioned the word bias or balance only once, but he mentioned independent or independence 26 times. What does that tell you?
Well, I think what's going on within the coalition is the view that the ABC has effectively become an island. The CEO is notionally accountable to the board, and yes, the government of the day gets to appoint board members for a period of up to 5 years. But there's no pressure from sponsors. There's no pressure from ratings. There's no external pressure in terms of the government being able to say, we've got a problem with management and that person needs to go. So really, as an organisation funded by more than $1 billion a year, the ABC sits as an island, unaccountable.
So what are you going to do about it?
Well, this is a conversation we've been having in the coalition. So the party room's been looking at this. There is a lot of anger because it is strongly felt and keenly felt that there's a lack of balance in the broadcaster. No one's after it being a state broadcaster, but people are after balance.
But you're limited, aren't you? I mean, what can you do? You can't sack the board.
No, this is the point. You can't. I mean, the government and the way it's been set up means that we provide funding, $1.1 billion a year, but then there is no accountability beyond that.
Well, you mentioned $1.1 billion a year. Surely the ABC is too big for a healthy democracy. No organisation, let alone a state broadcaster or a state-owned one, should be this big. I mean, private enterprise can't be this big. 5 radio stations every city, 4 TV stations. You've got to cut it, don't you?
Well, it is a big organisation. And look, don't get me wrong, I think it plays an important role. I'm not saying we throw the baby out with
we both agree, right?
We
listen to the sport. All right, fine.
Sure.
My point is, it's too big for a democracy, and particularly when it is exclusively, almost, of one side of politics.
Sure.
Should it be cut down?
Well, I think that there's scope to find savings, and indeed the government...
No, I'm not talking savings. You're dodging and weaving. Is it too big for a democracy?
Well, that's hard for me to answer, to be honest with you, Andrew. I mean, if you ask me what is my sense of it...
The answer is yes.
Well, no, if you ask me what is my sense of it, I do think that the ABC needs to stick to its charter. So in that sense, we've got to look at what is the main delivery.
They're giving you the 2 fingers.
But
Mark Scott just gave a speech giving no indication he's going to do that.
Yeah, but this is where I look at, for example, the fact that we've got a commercial broadcaster in terms of, for example, Sky News, and then you've got the ABC running a 24-hour news channel as well. I find those strange. I think there's certainly scope for savings there. Ultimately, what size it should be, that's a determination that's got to be made. But look, I do think that it's reached a scale and a significance.
This is a problem. The Liberals know it's a problem, but haven't got the courage yet to fix it.
With the greatest respect, Andrew, I think actually what it's about is, as I said, I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but it's got to be a question of balance. And to me, where the major problem is at the moment is that it's not balanced. And that's got to be the focus.
It's never going to be balanced. Mark Scott got up on national TV and said, forget it.
Yeah.
We're independent. You're not going to fix it.
Well, I'm confident that where there's a will, there's a way. And the coalition, the coalition is very focused, and this is part of the reason why we're making this a debate, because what's going on now in terms of the way it's become an island is unacceptable long term. There needs to be structural change, and I'm confident that we'll be able to achieve it.
Structural change. That could be anything good. Thank you, Stephen Chobo, for joining me.
Pleasure.